Good Sunday morning. I'm Marinaro. It's Brunchin with Marinaro. And of course, today we're talking Habs the way we usually do. And his absence, well, I found out why he wasn't there. We'll talk about that. A first ever AHL playoff start. And it was a good one for a Montreal Canadiens player who has raised some doubts over the last year. Who is the next number one? He's there at the Worlds. And the other guy is ranked number one, but it's really not unanimous. We'll talk about all that. Take your questions and more on Brunchin with Marinaro. Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette and HockeyInsideOut.com coming up right here on the Sick Bunch.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Sports entertainment like no other. Brought to you by 8.6 Beer. Intense by nature.
And good Sunday morning. Welcome. I'm Marinaro. And yes, brought to you by 8.6 Beer, intense by nature, the beer for those who follow their instinct and live their passions in order to make their mark. Why am I wearing these sunglasses today? I don't know. I just came from outside when I was, and I forgot to take them off. So here we go. Off they are. Joining me, as he does usually most Sundays, Stu Cowan. Good morning.
Hey, Tony, you're looking cool there with the glasses.
Thank you. Tom Ford, thank you very much. Why didn't I give him a plug if he's not a sponsor? Who knows? Maybe one day he will be. It's good to see you, Stu. It was good to see you also at Guy's funeral, but it's although it's good to see people at people's funeral, it's never good to see people at people's funeral, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. It was quite a touching ceremony, and you and I were both fortunate enough to be among the media inside the church, and they will never forget, and a person will never forget. Yeah.
I sent the Montreal Canadiens a note, to tell you the truth, thanking them for inviting me and making me a part of it. I mean, to receive an invitation there, and Guy Lafleur was, what can we say about Guy Lafleur that we haven't said already, right? But he was, if you grew up, and I grew up in the 70s, if you grew up in the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, whatever, you had a chance to watch Guy Lafleur play, chances are he was your idol, because for 6 consecutive seasons, he was the best player in the world from 1975 to 1980. So, that funeral was impressive, though, eh?
It was, and it was great to see so many of his former teammates, Larry Robinson, Steve Shutt, Guy Lapointe, Pierre Bouchard, you go on and on, but also players that he used to play against, opponents. Lanny McDonald was there, and a few, Darryl Sittler, a few of the other Leafs. Joe Sakic flew in for the ceremony, and talking with him, he was Guy Lafleur's roommate for 2 years when Lafleur played for the Nordiques, and talking about what an impact Guy had on him as a young player. Joe was only in his second year in the NHL when Guy joined the Nordiques, and all of a sudden the kid who grew up watching Guy Lafleur, and now you're his roommate. And he talked about how Guy just made everybody on the team feel comfortable. If you remember, that was a young Nordiques team, and Guy came in and just became one of the guys. And Joe talked about how much he learned about him, not only on the ice, but off the ice, and how to handle himself. And I thought it was a classy move by Joe Sakic to be there. As we all know, he's GM of the Colorado Avalanche, and they had a playoff game that night, but he still took the time to come to Montreal and be part of the ceremony.
It was really awesome. By the way, I was very disappointed that Jeff Petrie wasn't there. He's not the only one. There were a couple of his teammates that weren't there, but most of the players were there. But I have to tell you, and I gave it to him pretty good, by the way. I spoke with my sister last night, who told me that one of Jeff's kids was in hospital the week before, and another one was, having problems with allergies as well. I think one of his kids is probably asthmatic. I don't know that for a fact. Anyway, my sister knows, because she knows everything about everyone, because she follows all the Instagram accounts and all the wives and stuff like that. And I think she saw that his child was in hospital the week before. And when that child was hospitalized, I believe for 4 days, my sister told me. And then when that one came out, the other one had a little bit of a flare up with allergies and stuff like that. So I guess that's a lesson for me, to take issue with someone not being somewhere when I don't know what's going on in their life. But all's to say that Jeff's absence from the funeral, clearly, if you have one of your kids who was hospitalized a week before or a couple of days before, all's to say it's justified, right? So,
yeah, it was an impressive turnout by the Habs. It was good to see Shea Weber there and Carey Price and Caulfield and Gallagher and Suzuki. There was quite an impressive turnout, and Marty St. Louis there and Hughes and Gorton. So it was, as I said, it was an impressive turnout of teammates of Guy Lafleur, current Canadiens players and former players who used to play against them.
Yeah, it really was awesome.
I was wondering how many Stanley Cup rings were in that church.
My God, can you imagine?
Yeah.
Could you imagine?
Quite a few.
Yeah. Commissioner Bettman was there.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Daley was there.
Yeah. The Prime Minister, the Premier, the Mayor.
Yeah. I really enjoyed bumping into Gilbert Perreault. Here's another guy who was like one of the greatest hockey players ever. And hadn't seen him in a while. The last time I saw him, I think, was like when covering a Legends game or something like that, the alumni. And I don't really remember if when I saw him, I actually introduced myself or he actually even knew who I was, because it was probably about 15 years ago or whatever it was. But it was really nice to bump into him. We had a real good chat. He actually joined me here on the Sick Podcast a couple of days ago. And he had a lot of Guy Lafleur stories. I mean, Gilbert Perreault was the best junior hockey player in 1970. Guy Lafleur was the best junior hockey player in 1971. They squared off against each other, played in a couple of Canada Cups with each other. It was pretty amazing. Well,
I'm good friends with Alan Globensky, who was an enforcer on those Montreal junior Canadian teams back in the day. And older fans, Montreal hockey fans, will remember the "On veut Globensky" chants at the Forum. He was the toughest guy in the league. And he told me, he says, he didn't get a lot of ice time, so he spent a lot of time sitting on the bench watching all these guys. And he told me that Gilbert Perreault was the best hockey player he ever saw. And he said, if he had been drafted by the Canadiens and played with surrounded by the talent that Guy Lafleur has, he probably would have had similar, if maybe not even better numbers than Guy Lafleur. Of course, he went to Buffalo and not as good of a team, formed the French Connection line. The other Gilbert Perreault story, I remember years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, playing in a media game against a bunch of media guys against NHL old timers, and Gilbert Perreault was on the old timers team, and I remember playing defense, and the puck went in my corner, and I went to get it, and I heard this sound behind me, the skates in the ice. I turned around and Gilbert Perreault coming at me. Wow. And he was not in NHL playing shape, but the way he could still skate, I'll never forget the sound of his skates cutting through the ice.
Well, think about this, Stu. Gilbert Perreault averaged more points per game in the playoffs than Guy Lafleur. Mm-hmm. He was just behind Guy Lafleur. I mean, their stats are very, very, very similar. Mm-hmm. And Gilbert Perreault played on a great line with the French Connection with Richard Martin and René Robert. But imagine if Gilbert Perreault would have been a Montreal Canadien.
Yeah.
And he would have played with Guy Lafleur, or he would have played with Jacques Lemaire, and he would have played with Steve Shutt, and he would have played with the big three, and Dryden would have been his goalie, and Scotty Bowman would have been his coach. And could you imagine, what one of his former teammates says is he's probably right. I mean, I have a friend of mine, Pino Azaro, who's the president of the Gilbert Perreault fan club. As a matter of fact, I put him on the podcast to have a little 5-minute chat with Gilbert Perreault. And he said to me, if Gilbert Perreault would have been a Montreal Canadien, I mean, he would have had a statue outside the Bell Center today as well.
The thing is, you got to remember, too, with Guy Lafleur, Gilbert Perreault came into the NHL, was a star right away. Marcel Dion, Denis Savard. And I was talking with Scotty Bowman after Guy Lafleur died. And, people say, Guy wasn't good his first 3 seasons. He struggled. And Bowman disagreed. He said he was on a different – he had Yvon Cornway ahead of him on the depth chart at right wing. He wasn't on the number 1 power play. He wasn't on the number 1 line. He said if he had gone to the California Seals, he probably would have scored 55 goals his first year. He would have had first line ice time. He would have on the first power play. He said in Montreal, he said just the team was so good, he was sort of broken in slowly. And Scotty Bowman told me they used to scrimmage a lot in practices, and he used to always put Bob Gainey against Guy Lafleur in scrimmages. And he said it helped both of them. Like they both developed from that. Guy having to play against arguably the best defensive forward in the NHL, and Gainey playing against the guy who would become one of the greatest offensive players in the NHL. So Bowman said he doesn't agree when people say that Lafleur struggled his first 3 years. He said it was a different team and a different environment. And if he had gone to a team like Buffalo or California or one of those weaker teams, he would have had more points and more goals his first 2 or 3 years.
All right. So let's talk about Cale Makar, who played his first ever AHL playoff game for the Laval Rocket, who had dropped game 1 to the Syracuse Crunch with Kevin Poulin in goal. It was a back-to-back for the Rocket. They won their second game by a score of 3-2. They were outshot. They were outchanced. He made 37 stops. He was very good. Good for Cale Makar, who pulls this off a couple of days after his general manager says, listen, Carey Price is the only number 1 we have in the organization. Thoughts?
And even Carey Price isn't a number 1 right now because he said the way his knee is, he doesn't think he could play 50 or 55 games. And Kent Hughes was honest. I mean, good for him, a GM who's just speaking honestly, because Samuel Montembeault hasn't shown that he can be a number 1 goalie. Jake Allen is an excellent backup goalie, but the more he plays, the more his game seems to break down and injuries happen. And Cale Makar, he's been great in the AHL, and he struggled in the NHL. He's looked like a deer in the headlights in the NHL. I remember an NHL scout telling me once, Cale Makar was a 7th-round pick, and he was telling me, scouts make mistakes, and some guys don't get drafted. Sometimes it's because of their lack of size, like a Martin St. Louis or a guy like that. Other things, but he says normally, most of the time when a guy was a 7th-round pick, eventually he'll look like that 7th-round pick at some point. There are exceptions to the rule, but 85% of the time. And Cale Makar was a 7th-round pick, and so there's obviously holes in his game that scouts saw when they were scouting him for the NHL draft. And I think those holes are highlighted when he gets up to the NHL level. He's been outstanding in the AHL. In his defense, though, because of COVID, the last 2 years he's played less than 50 games in the AHL. So. He needs a full regular season of AHL. Like, I'm not ready to give up on Cale Makar just yet.
Yeah.
He definitely right now doesn't look like he could be a number 1 goalie in the NHL. But again, COVID has thrown a wrench into his development plans. He needs a full season next year where he plays like 60 games in the AHL. Yeah. Gets into that groove of being a number 1 goalie. And then we'll make a judgment from there. But as of now, the Canadiens don't have, if Carey Price doesn't come back, they don't have a legitimate number 1 NHL goalie right now.
Yeah, Cale Makar said once upon Stefan Waite, former Montreal Canadiens goalie coach, said once upon a time that Cale Makar is going to need 200 games at the American Hockey League level, in his opinion.
And don't forget, he played university hockey too, Tony. So he didn't play a ton of games at the university level either, compared to a kid who played junior. Correct.
Yeah, of course, because he played at Northeastern, where he played 34 games one season. He played 36 games the other season, and I think at the American Hockey League level, I think he's got 83 games, and he's got 1 game in the playoffs. So you would think, based on what Stefan Waite told us, that it's going to take another 2 years, at least another 2 years of AHL regular season hockey and AHL playoff hockey for Cale Makar to be able to hit that 200 mark.
Yeah, which is why if Carey Price doesn't come back, I'm pretty sure Kent Hughes is going to go out and get another veteran goalie to split the duties with Jake Allen next season.
All right, why don't we do this? We have a bunch of questions that everyone, I'm sure, wants to ask, so we'll get to them. We'll get to them throughout the entire show. Sharing is caring, by the way. If you want to share this on social media, we thank you very much. We are live on Facebook right now, where you can share it with all your friends. You can share it with other groups at the Sick Podcast. We are live on Twitter right now, where you can share it as well. You can comment. We have some of our moderators and some people behind the scenes right now that are on all the social media channels that will forward us all your comments, all your questions. We'll try and get to them. If you love the podcast, comment SICK, S-I-C-K, and then we'll know that you absolutely love it. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. And by subscribing, you're notified when we upload an episode or when we go live, where we're going right now. We usually do on Sundays for the most part throughout the hockey season. We've continued it here in the offseason, and we'll see what happens. All right, okay. We'll get to the questions in about a minute or two. So who's the next number 1? Were you surprised that Kent Hughes said that Jake Allen is not a number one.
No, I don't think he was saying anything that we haven't seen with our own eyes. I mean, 2 seasons ago when Carey Price was also out and Jake Allen played a lot down the stretch, if I remember right, he lost the last 5 games of the regular season. And he was brought here at his age and his stage of his career. I mean, he's one of the best backup goalies you could have in the NHL. He can come in and give you a chance to win every night when he's in. But I just think the more he plays, and we saw, he had 2 groin injuries this year. The first one was he hadn't played for a long time. There was that break there. He came back, and the first game back, he hurt his groin. And then the next time I heard it was the other leg. So he's at that age now. He's a really, really good, like the perfect backup goalie for Carey Price. If Carey Price, the original plan was Carey would play 55 games or whatever, and Jake Allen would play the rest. And hopefully for the Canadiens, that could be the scenario again next season. But as of now, it looks like it's doubtful that Carey Price will be back. And which, as I said, that's why I think that Kent Hughes will go out and look for another veteran goalie on like a 2-year contract and have those 2 guys split the goaltending duties next season if indeed Carey Price can't come back. But I mean, for Kent Hughes, he's good for him, speaking honestly. He's just, I don't think it's a shock.
It's a breath of fresh air, right?
Allen found it a shock that he would say that.
Yeah.
Maybe didn't like hearing it, but I mean, he spoke the truth. I mean, we've seen it with our own eyes watching Jake Allen over the last 2 seasons. Great guy who can come in and play 4 or 5 games in a row or whatever, but then as he gets 7, 8, 9, 10, it falls off a little bit.
Yeah, well, down the stretch when Jake Allen got hurt, his agent Alain Roy came out and said, Jake's playing too much. I mean, he had to carry too much of the load, and if you're number 1 in the National Hockey League, you're playing over 55 games per season. So,
Jake Allen was asked about that too in the post-mortem news conference, and he said he sort of, I don't know if he disagreed with his agent, but sort of he said that he feels he's at a stage in his career now where he can tell the coach, like, I'm good, or no, I need a break, like I've played too much. So him saying that leads me to believe he would have told Marty St. Louis, I need a break if he really felt he needed one. But I mean, as you say, his agent saying that just shows that he's not like Carey Price. Carey Price can't play. Stefan Wade, after he got fired, talked back then that Carey Price can't really play 3 games in a row. He needs to play with 3 and 4. He needs to have a time off. And he talked about not only his knee, he had back issues, hip issues. There's a lot of things, a lot of wear and tear on Carey Price's body.
Yeah, you're right about that. All right, on to the questions we go. Alan Rutman, do you trade Byron and keep Rem Pitlick at a lower salary? Of course, you'd love to.
Yeah, I don't think you can trade Paul Byron now with the injury issues he's gone through and
damaged goods, unfortunately.
Yeah, damaged goods. Yeah,
with all due respect, right?
And I love Paul Byron. That's the term.
Yeah, of course, everybody does.
I love Paul Byron as a player and as a person. He's one of the classiest pro athletes I've ever dealt with, and for him, hopefully, a long off season will allow him to heal his hip properly and come back and be healthy. And one of the things he said, which is positive news, is that when he did come back, he realized he still has his speed, and we saw it. He still has his speed. Unfortunately, the other side of his hip started to break down a bit, compensating to the left side where he had the surgery. But a long off season will help him, and hopefully for Paul Byron, he can come back and be fully healthy next season. And if he is fully healthy and can play, this contract's a little steep. I don't know at that point if they'd be able
3.4.
Yeah, but I'm hoping Paul Byron can come back and be the player he was before having that hip surgery.
They'll trade him at the deadline.
If there's a market,
he comes back, and there's always a team that wants to pick up a veteran. I shouldn't say always, because I have to admit I'm surprised that Matthew Perreault wasn't picked up at the deadline.
I'm not really. He didn't really show me much that another team might be interested in. But Paul Byron, a fantastic penalty killer who can score goals shorthanded also. As you say, trade deadline going into the playoffs, to have a guy like that with his speed who can kill penalties, and just a great presence in the locker room, like a really respected guy, liked around the league. Never backs down from anybody despite his size. And gives you 100% every time he's on the ice.
Hey, I know we usually talk Habs here, but man, I want to talk about Sidney Crosby for a second. I mean, I tweeted something last night, and I said, I tweeted, I never watched Bobby Orr play live, right? I was born in 72. My first memory was Lafleur's goal in 79. But I remember my father screaming. I'm not so sure I remember watching the goal, but watching the highlights leads me to believe that I remember watching the goal. But I do remember my father screaming in happiness, of course, a big Montreal Canadiens fan. But I was born in 72. I started watching around 79. For me, Gretzky, Lemieux, Crosby.
Well,
that's the tweet.
I was born in '63. I got to watch Bobby Orr was one of my heroes. Bobby Orr and Rusty Staub were two of my heroes when I was a kid. And I'll still argue with people. I'll say Bobby Orr was the greatest hockey player who ever lived. Red Fisher told me the same thing from all the players he saw during his career. Like, nobody excited him or brought him out the way Bobby Orr did. But Sidney Crosby, like, what a player he's been, and what an ambassador for hockey. Like, on and off the ice, he's just a classy guy and handles himself well. And I remember being in Pittsburgh before COVID, and the media, it was after morning skate, and the media mob around his locker was crazy. And he talked with everybody. He did a one-on-one with a Pittsburgh guy. I wanted to do a little one-on-one with him, ask him about his equipment. Like, he's wearing some of the equipment he's worn since junior. And I said, "Yeah, a couple minutes." Yeah, no problem. Like, he couldn't have been more nicer with everybody in the media and everybody around him. And I remember talking with, I can't remember who it was sitting beside him, had the stall beside him. And I was asking him, I wrote a column about what's it like sitting in the lockers stall beside Sidney Crosby. And he said, it's like this every day, everywhere we go. Like, it's not, some players in Montreal, they get the media crowd, but on the road, there's nobody. Everywhere Sidney Crosby has gone during his NHL career, he's swarmed by the media, and he's handled it all with class and grace, and answers questions thoughtfully. And so, yeah, I mean, Sidney Crosby, role model on and off the ice, the way he's handled himself throughout his career.
As a player, Gretzky passed the torch to Lemieux. As a player and as an ambassador, the torch was passed from Gretzky to Crosby.
Yeah, and Gretzky and Lemieux even more so, got by so much on talent. Like, you know, if you watch Mario Lemieux in his prime, he wasn't like working too hard in his own end, or, you know, he did what he did. He put up points. Sidney Crosby is like the hardest working guy on the ice. Every shift he's out there. He's that mix of not just how talented he is, but I mean, he works as hard as Brendan Gallagher's of the world work on the ice every single shift. And that's part of what makes him such a great player. The way he wins puck battles along the boards, the way he wins faceoffs, the way he, like, as an all-around player, I mean, he's right up there with the greats who ever played the game.
Phenomenal. Back to the questions we go. It's Brunchin with Marinaro, Andy Zaft. Do you think the Canadiens should bring Larry Robinson in as a senior advisor? Wherever he's been, they've won. Robinson could be a voice for the new players coming in on what it means to be a Hab. Stu, Larry's older. Not so sure that he wants to be around all that much. In his previous couple of stints in the National Hockey League, St. Louis, and prior to that with San Jose, Larry was living on his ranch in Florida. He would fly out to either San Jose or St. Louis for about 5 days, maybe spend 5 days on ice and off ice with the kids and mentoring and helping with development. Not so sure he wants that whole being, but listen, at the very least, I have to say this. You saw, even once again, if there are ever any doubts, the way Larry conducted himself at the funeral. His first words in French, knowing how important that is to a lot of people in this city and in this province. Going over to see Lise after and giving her a kiss and giving her a hug and consoling her. Just Larry Robinson is anything and everything you would ever want in an ambassador for your NHL team. The Montreal Canadiens have to hire Larry Robinson as a team ambassador. Lafleur was an ambassador. He's no longer with us. If you make Larry Robinson your next ambassador, I'm sure Guy would approve.
Well, the Canadiens are trying to mend fences with their alumni, which were, the relationship fell apart with Marc Bergevin as GM for whatever reason. It's hard to understand. Also hard to understand how Marc Bergevin and Michel Therrien decided to hire J.J. Daigneault as an assistant coach to work with the defense instead of Larry Robinson. I can't imagine any other team in the NHL making that decision. Larry wanted that job. I know that for a fact. He had no interest in being head coach. So if Michel Therrien had worried he'd be a threat for him taking over as head coach, that wasn't going to be the case. Larry didn't want to deal with us in the media. He had no interest in doing, 2 news conferences a day on a game day, and he just wanted to come in and coach. And how the Canadiens didn't make that happen is mind-boggling. They paid a price for it. I think back like how Larry Robinson would have been able to mentor PK Subban on and off the ice back in those days. Maybe patch up some of the relationships with his teammates that maybe weren't so great. It's hard to understand. I know the relationship with Larry and the Canadiens hasn't been great, but I think that's something the Canadiens need to fix. I think I know he's passed away. He doesn't want to coach anymore. I know.
I'd love to know why, though. Like, how do you not get along with Larry Robinson? Probably one of the greatest people that you will ever meet.
It's shocking. It really is. And, if they should reach out to him, I think, and at least try and bring him back in some kind of an ambassador role. Even have him come in once in a while. I don't think he'd want to do it on a regular basis now at the age he's at and everything he's been through, but to have him come in a couple of times a year and talk with the defense. There's going to be a lot of young defensemen on this team. And Larry Robinson walks in a room, it's instant credibility. He's such when he walks into a room, everybody notices him, right? With his size and the way he carries himself. I remember someone telling me, if Larry Robinson tells you to put your left skate on your right foot, you just do it. You just whatever he tells you to do, you're going to do. I know he had a big impact on Perreault, the young defenseman in St. Louis, when he was dealing with the Blues.
Sure.
Larry Robinson has a Stanley Cup ring with the Blues, at the Devils, at the Canadiens, everywhere. He's a winner, right? Everywhere he goes, he wins. And when a team surrounds itself with winners, its chances of winning are better. So the Canadiens, if Larry Robinson is interested in having an ambassador role, and I don't know if he is, I know he lives in Florida now, and he's at the age he's at. He's enjoying his retirement, but
why?
They should at least look into it and ask him if he's interested, and if he is, and even if it's in a minimal role, like 2 or 3 times a year coming in, to me that's good enough.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, you could still be an ambassador. You could still live in Florida and be an ambassador for the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, you take a look at your schedule. And you say, all right, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to need you 10 times a year, and I'm sure that Larry would accommodate. I mean, I would imagine. I mean, Larry loves the Montreal Canadiens. So, okay, back to the questions we go.
And loves Montreal, as you mentioned, Tony. He started his eulogy in French, and his French is very good.
Yeah,
him and Bob Gainey from that era, they came here, and they realized they wanted to be part of the community. They wanted to connect with the fans, and that was one of the many ways they did it.
Tony and Stu, are the odds very good that the Habs sign 1 or 2 big-name free agents this offseason? No, the odds are not. I mean, Kent Hughes has told you that 5-star unrestricted free agent is not coming to Montreal. Now, does that mean the 4-star isn't? Well, basically what he's trying to tell you is the ones who are going to sign for the most amount of money, he cannot bring in because he's handcuffed with some contracts that he's going to have to move, or else it's not possible. And chances are, he doesn't think he'll be able to move enough of them to be able to do it.
And there's also the Carey Price situation and the Shea Weber situation. The NHL, there's a lot of questions surrounding Shea Weber and his contract. The NHL hasn't signed off on him staying on long-term injured reserve for the final 4 years. The insurance company, who, if they're doubting that he's injured enough to stay on that, they're going to fight because they don't want to be stuck paying that what's left on the contract. And it's one of the reasons why Kent Hughes wasn't able to move him at the trade deadline to Arizona, and Arizona went up and got Little in his contract instead. So there's question marks with Shea Weber in his contract. There's big question marks with Carey Price. And until those two things are settled, Kent Hughes doesn't even know what he's working with. Like, he doesn't know what he can offer anybody. So he's really in a holding pattern right now. And at the postmortem, that's what he said. The main thing they want with Carey Price is just some clarity. Like, okay, is there going to be another operation coming up? Is he definitely gone for next season? Is his career over? Is there a chance he come back? So that's $18 million in salary cap hits right there, just between Weber and Price.
Comment sick if you love the Sick podcast. We'll take, if you really love it, you can comment sick as many times as you want, by the way. Sick, enter, sick, enter, sick, enter, sick, enter. You can do it all day. It's a beautiful thing. All right, we'll get to more questions. By the way, we had talked about the Lafleur funeral before, and we talked about Jeff Petry's absence, and I mentioned that I was brought to my attention that one of his kids was hospitalized, I believe, for 3 or 4 days, and I think there was an asthma situation there, and I think another one had a challenge with allergies and stuff like that. So that's understandable. Yoel Armia, of course, will recall, took a personal leave of absence from the Montreal Canadiens. He is playing for Finland at the World Championships. So he wasn't there either, but he is with Finland at the Worlds, which means, I guess, that his family situation has got better and improved, which is really good news.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he performs at the World Championships. I mean,
but it's encouraging that a guy like that who had such a terrible season is saying, you know what? Okay, I'm going. Yeah. Because they had a short summer. He could have easily said, I'm not going. Mm-hmm. Suzuki chose not to go. Caulfield chose not to go. Now, Armia didn't play nearly as much hockey as these guys did. So obviously, these guys are tired, and Suzuki had therapy days down the stretch. But, Armia could have passed on the invitation. I'm glad he took it, and I hope that he can rediscover his game at the Worlds, and it gives him momentum going at the training camp.
That would be good, but I think Yoel Armia is was he 27 now? I think. I mean, he is who he is. I mean, He's got all the talent in the world. That's why he was a first-round draft pick. He'll show up. He'll look wonderful he'll look amazing for 2 or 3 games, and then he just disappears and you don't see him. So he's at that stage in his career. I think he is who he is. And as far as Suzuki and Caulfield not going, I think that's a good decision because, Suzuki talked about he had a lower back problem at the end of the season. That's why he was missing practices, and he just wants to make sure he's 100% ready for training camp next year. And for Cole Caulfield, he's been a crazy stretch. You remember from last season, right from Wisconsin to the Canadiens, right through the Stanley Cup final, a short summer, a long season this year, some ups and downs, mentally, physically. It's been a tough. So I think for him, it's just take it easy, go home, relax for the summer, train, get ready for training camp. And Brendan Gallagher also was invited to Team Canada. And I mean, he definitely shouldn't go. I mean, he needs to get his body ready for next season. So they're thinking more about the Canadiens than they are about their own personal stuff. And Gallagher talked about how much he loves representing Canada and what an honor it is. But at this point in time, the best thing for him is to go back home to BC and train and make sure he's at least as close to 100% healthy as he can be for training camp next season.
Back to the questions. MJ, Tony, one of the names that was floated around for a possible replacement in net for the Montreal Canadiens was Ilya Samsonov. What do you think of that possibility? He's young and a former first rounder.
Depend on the contract situation and what he wants. Like, I mean, the Canadiens, I don't think are going to sign another goalie for more than a 2-year term. Jake Allen has 1 year left. And again, everything depends on Carey Price, right? They're not going to go out and sign a goalie for $7 million a year when they don't know what's happening with Carey Price. So it's hard to answer that question right now. And it's hard. Kent Hughes, if he was on here with us right now, he'd have a hard time answering it also. Yeah,
Ilya Samsonov, if we take a look at in terms of his contract, he's got a cap hit. His contract ends at the end of this year. It's expiry status. He's RFA. It's at $2 million cap hit. But for a guy who is once again a relatively young goaltender, he was born in '97, so he's 25 years old.
Yeah,
6'3", 210 pounds. Look, when you're 25, you're not at your best yet for a goalie, which you'll probably maybe hit at around 28. You would say he's a big guy, covers a lot of room. Look, I think it's an interesting name. I really do.
At that contract figure, it would make sense too, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, I think Jake Allen could be the number one goalie next season, but number one playing 50 games, not number one playing 60 games or 62 games or something like the main guys do. So that would, at that NHL experience and that salary level and that, it would make sense.
Former first round pick, 22nd overall, Ilya Samsonov. It really is interesting. All right. Okay. Back to the questions. Steve Steen, why not go with Jake and Monty in goal next year if Price is not available? We are making a cup run. These other two guys will entertain and do a good job. Steve, I'm buying what you're selling. I am Mr. Rebuild. I have Connor Bedard in my dreams. I know nothing is guaranteed, but should it be Matvei Michkov in the end, that's okay too. I believe that for all this talk of unrestricted free agents and replacing Carey and bringing in another number one, I believe it's nonsense. Instead of bringing in an unrestricted free agent who's 35, who's going to give you 1 year or 2 years, and they're going to be at $7 or $8 million, I'd rather one more year of suffering for what could be at least a decade of fun and entertainment.
Yeah, but you're going to have a really young defense next season, Tony, and I think you need, you don't want guys losing confidence too much early in their careers. I think you want somebody with a little bit more of an NHL pedigree than Sam Montembeault as your second goalie. I mean, you're not going to go out and get a 5-star goalie, obviously, because they don't have the money, and that's not the thing. But I think they need somebody who gives them a better chance to win each night when he's in goal.
Speaking of 5-star goalies, boy, are Pittsburgh really getting to Shesterkin, and are Toronto really getting to Vasilevsky?
Yeah, it's early. But it's sort of a follow of what the regular season was, right, Tony? There was more goals scored this regular season than in years, and it's carried right into the playoffs. And part of it, I guess, is referees are continuing to call more penalties, at least through the first round. I'm sure by the time we get to the Stanley Cup final, that'll change. Yeah. But, lots of goals, lots of excitement.
Yeah, hopefully for Tampa, Toronto wins the next game and go up by 3-1, and then Tampa will have them just where they want them. All kidding aside, Stu, I'll say this. If Toronto goes up 3-1 versus Tampa this year, I'm going to bet on the Leafs to be able to close out that series. I don't think they're blowing it 2 years in a row. It really looks like it could be the year of the Leafs, by the way, mind you. It looks like it could be the year of the Colorado Avalanche for sure. We talked about Bobby Orr before. I think Cale Makar might go down as the most entertaining defenseman in the history of the National Hockey League after Bobby Orr. He's still relatively young in his career. And by the way, Paul Coffey was absolutely amazing to watch. Amazing. But if Cale Makar keeps this up, and you would think he's even going to get better, this guy he's a franchise player.
Well, what's nice now in the playoffs is getting to watch him every second night because he's one of those guys out west. Montreal, we don't get to see him that much. They come here once a year. Not at all last year because of COVID. Their games are late at night. Most people aren't up watching them. But what a hockey player this kid is. One of the former NHL refs on Twitter, I can't remember which one, tweeted the other day saying he's never seen a guy skate like this. It's incredible the way this kid can skate and the way he plays the game. And he is the modern day version of Bobby Orr. I mean, he's just does it all, the way he skates, the way he shoots, it passes, and watching him walk the line on the blue line in the offensive zone is a thing of beauty. The way he pivots and turns, he's just I'm really enjoying now in the playoffs getting a chance to watch him on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because there are a couple of former NHL refs now that are pretty vocal on Twitter. Right? Tim Peel is one of them.
Yep.
It
might have been Peel another. Yeah.
Is it Peel?
It might have been Peel. I can't remember. I saw it the other day and just talking about you've never seen a skater like
yeah. So here we go.
Was it Peel?
Yeah. You see that?
I can't read it there, Tony. I don't know what's in. No, my eyes aren't good enough.
All right, I'll read it for you. I seriously cannot believe how good Cale Makar is. Mm-hmm. His skating is something I've never seen before.
Yeah.
That's coming from a former NHL referee who I imagine saw a lot of people skate.
Refereed for a long time. Yeah, I saw that tweet and I did a double take. I know that, and he's right. I mean, it's he's seen a lot more hockey players skate than I have, and up close at ice level. And for him to say that says a lot about just how good this kid is.
Hey, by the way, Tim Peel, if you could see him there, okay, he's really living the life, eh? Yeah. Hold on a second. Do you know where he was?
Kentucky Derby.
At the Kentucky Derby.
Good for him.
Derby
I wish
party,
I was there. That's on my bucket list, Tony. The Kentucky Derby is one of my favorite sporting events every year. And on my bucket list, my son's 21. I told him one day we're going to go. We're going to wear the hats and drink the drink and the whole bit. I love that sporting event.
And by the way, for those who didn't see yesterday's race, I think it's amazing. One of the greatest things I've ever seen from a sporting perspective in my life. And I think it's safe to say we've seen a lot of great things, right? But what Rich Strike was able to do anyway, listen, it's one of those, I won't even talk about it. You have to see it to believe it. But did you ever hear my horse story, Stu?
No, you've told me about it, but you never told me the story. You said you had a good horse story to tell me, so I can't.
All right, okay. So years ago, we're doing some work, and we end up going. There was I think an event with the station, and I believe it was on the West Island in a pool place, a billiard place, which I think you would know well, probably in Brossard, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And so I show up there, and there's an event going on, and I don't remember what event it was, but I think it was a college event, college football or college basketball or whatever, or maybe it was March Madness, and I think everyone was there doing a bracket and stuff like that. And someone comes up to me and says, hey, so how's it going? We start talking. And they said, yeah, I was at this race and stuff like that and whatever. And I said, well, what'd you go to the race for? And she answers to me, well, she says, my horse was racing in the race. I said, you have a horse racing at the Kentucky Derby or whatever? And she said, yeah, I don't remember. It was a big race, right? Yeah. And I said, wow, that's really, really cool, man. I've always wanted that kind of life. Like, that's the life. That's cool. So she looks at me and she says, do you want to buy in on the horse? Oh, geez. What do you mean? She says, well, the horse has a ton of potential, but the horse is like a relatively unknown just yet, right? But we believe that this horse could end up being a prize horse and stuff like that. And I said, wow. And she said, yeah, so they're selling shares. And she said, I bought a share in the horse and it'll cost you $500. And I said, all right, what's the horse's name? She said, the horse's name is Someone Loves You. So I said, wow. And she said, yes, as a matter of fact, The horse is coming to Saratoga in a couple of weeks. Why don't you buy in on the horse? So there I am. I don't want to sound like a cheapskate. $500 for the horse. I don't have $500 on me, but I'm with my buddy Phil. And I'm like, Phil, he just offered me to buy into the horse. He says, yeah. So we can't say no. I got to say yes. I got to buy the horse. So he says, okay, you know what? I'll go 50-50 with you. So I go to the Interact machine inside the establishment. I pull out $500 or I pull out $250 and Phil pulls out $250 or whatever it is. We give the cash. We sign the papers right there. We bought in a share of the horse at $500. We go to Saratoga. We bring the wives. I'm staying at a Motel 8 or whatever it is because I just gave all the money that I have to buy the horse type of thing. But I'm trying to act like a big shot. So anyway, we walk in. I'm wearing the hat or smoking the cigar. Phil's smoking the cigar. He's got the hat going, this and that. We walk in. We're dressed to kill. We're there for our horse. Someone loves you and stuff like that. Stu, 151 to odds. Someone loves you wins the race. I put $100 or whatever it is, or a couple of $100. Myself and Phil, we put it on the horse. Final lap. Horse is in first. Phil and I are jumping up and down. We're going to be rich. We're going to be rich. Takes the turn. All of a sudden, I see this horse limping and wobbling and whatever. Everyone blows by the horse. Horse finishes last. Was told at the end of the race that this was a short track runner. Was running for a long track for the very first time. Couldn't take it. Broke its leg.
Oh.
And they had to put it down the next day.
Oh.
That was my $500.
Oh man. Well, maybe the excitement, you got $500. So that's horse racing. I mean, for those who didn't watch the races, I mean, Rich Strike, the horse who won, there's 20 horses in the race, and he was number 21. Yeah. Because he wasn't supposed to be in the race. There was a scratch on Friday. They put him in 80 to 1 odds. He wins the race, and that horse.
What an amazing story.
Some of the pre-race show, and that horse, you could have bought that horse last year for $30,000.
Wow.
That horse, after you ran a claiming race, and you could have had him for $30,000.
Story of my life. I never jump on opportunities. Instead, I buy a horse, and they had to put it down 2 weeks later. All right, okay, back to the questions we go. I'm getting depressed just thinking about it. Why is it everyone always makes money but me? David, Tony, we have Dobes in development. Seems like a very promising goalie prospect. From what you know, how far away is he from making a debut? Stu, based on everything I hear, and it is promising, but by the time Dobes plays a game in the National Hockey League, you're looking at what, 3 years away?
Yeah, the whole situation will be different.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. I mean,
more questions. This one's for Stu. Who are your top 3 draft picks? Wright, Cooley, Slafkovsky, Stu?
Yeah, that's probably it. If it's going to be that order, that's the way it looks going in. I mean, I don't pretend to be a draft expert because I don't see these guys. I see them at the World Juniors or I see YouTube. I'm not out in junior rinks. My job isn't to cover junior hockey, so I know what I read.
We do talk to people who do it for a living, though.
Yeah, but I mean, that looks like the 3 guys that are going to be at the top.
Yeah. Also, keep in mind, Nemec, Jiricek, and Kimmel. Those are 3 that are being talked about as well, who could very well end up going 4, 5, and 6. So anyway, keep an eye on those players for sure. But I was going to get to Shane Wright because he's ranked number 1 by Central Scouting, but he's not unanimous, is he?
No. There's no. It's one of those draft years. It's not like when it was Alexis Lafreniere or Crosby, these other guys where it's a slam dunk who's number 1. I mean, he's not almost unanimous number 1, Central Scouting and all that, but there's no guarantee. Like, it's not like he's number 1 without a doubt. It's not like it's gonna be a total shock if whoever has the number 1 pick picks someone else.
Yeah, I think someone in your family just said he's nice, though. I don't know if they're talking about Shane Wright or they're talking about me, but anyway, why don't we do this so you can get on with your Sunday afternoon? We'll wrap it up here in 2 minutes. So let's try and get to some speed questions. Let's go. 2 minutes of questions. JF, is it likely that Caulfield extension could be delayed until December? Stu?
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that because, he's looking at what Suzuki got, and he's going to be wanting somewhere close to that. They're not going to give him, I don't think, what Suzuki got because he's a center and there's more of a value on a centerman. But it's going to be interesting to see how those contract negotiations go. But I think Kent Hughes will want to wrap that up sooner rather than later.
I think it'll be done in season, and I think it's going to be a very, very long-term deal so that they can have Suzuki and Caulfield here for as long as possible. Yeah. And it helps that they're really, really good friends, and it helps that they get together, they get along, they have chemistry, and that they're both producing. At least they did in the final in the second half.
And it's not a coincidence that at the postmortem news conference, they brought the two of them out together. Yeah. The media. They're almost like attached at the hip now.
Yeah, like me and you. All right, next. Roy, goaltending depth in the organization is a need. Should the Habs be investing draft capital for goaltenders, real draft capital, not seventh-round picks? I don't think so because it's a roster retransformation and revamp over the next couple of years, so there's no urgency. Next. Brent, good morning, Tony and Stu. Stu, this one's for you. Do you think all the bright young players we have coming up, our team may be sick in 3 years, just like this podcast?
It could be. I mean, you look at the Rangers, which Jeff Gorton started the rebuild there. 3 years on, they're a pretty good team. So, I mean, are they going to be a Stanley Cup winner in 3 years? Hard to say, but I think that within 3 years, they can be a legitimate team contending to get in the playoffs. They'll
be great, but there's nothing as sick as this podcast. And I should end it on that note, but one last one. Let's go. Alan, why haven't the Canadiens retired number 22 and others, even though they played in the glory days? Obviously, Steve Shutt's 22, Jacques Lemaire's 25, deserve to go up at 1 point, Stu.
They do, and Cole Caulfield didn't choose number 22. They gave it to him, and you see all the Caulfield sweaters at the Bell Center, number 22. I haven't seen that many sweaters for one player since PK, all the 76 Subban sweaters. But you got to remember, Caulfield wore number 26 coming up because of Marty St. Louis. You like Marty St. Louis, and if Jeff Petry's not here next season, you wonder if the Canadiens switch Caulfield to number 26, which will upset people who spent the fortune buying number 22 Cole Caulfield sweaters. But I mean, Steve Shutt, tied for Guy Lafleur for the single season record for most goals was 60. Guy Lafleur didn't become Guy Lafleur until Steve Shutt got here. And it's him and Lemaire are two of the guys that it's surprising their numbers aren't up there. And
it would be a smart move by the organization because everyone who bought a Caulfield 22, most of them are going to go back and buy a Caulfield 26, or
at least you would only have to take one number
off. They probably only have that jersey for the rest of their lives.
You could also just take off the 1, 2, and so on a 6. So that would be.
You can do that as well. It looks a little weird though. Stu, have a great Sunday. Happy Mother's Day to everyone watching. Enjoy your families. Give your mom a call. Tell her you love her. Do the same thing to your mother-in-law, your wife, your girlfriend. Happy Mother's Day to all the great moms out there. We appreciate it. Rick says, sick. It's the best hockey show. Thank you very much. On that note, have a great Sunday, everyone. Thanks, Stu. We'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure.
The Sick Podcast. I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by 8.6, Intense by Nature.